It was an ordinary morning in the city when, on her way to work, this woman saw a little boy sitting at a bus stop. He had been sitting there all week, every day, regardless of the weather. The woman was curious and finally decided to ask him why he was sitting there. What she heard was an incredible story. Little boy has been waiting at this bus stop all week. Then this woman asks why. The boy, whose name was Tim, told the woman that he was waiting for his father. His father is a bus driver and works on this line, so Tim thought he would be able to find him here. The woman asked for more information about the boy's situation. After all, why wouldn't he just wait for his father back home and meet him there in the evening? What she then heard was a tragic and touching story that this boy told her. She looked at the sad boy and couldn't possibly do nothing. Therefore, she took a seat next to him. She gave him a big hug and said she was going to help him. What the boy said to her made tears run down her cheeks. The boy explained that his father was a hard-working man who always took care of his family and friends, but that he had suddenly disappeared about a week ago. My father is a bus driver, and last Wednesday he left for work and didn't come back at the end of the day, Tim told the old woman who had come sit next to him. My mother has already called and searched many towns and places, but she can't find my father anywhere. She had also hung up posters everywhere in the hope she would get a call. According to his work, he still drove his routes on Wednesday, but did not show up for work the next day, Tim explained. Where could Tim's father be anyway? Tim explained further, explaining that it was Christmas vacation for him now, which meant he had the whole week off from school. And where his classmates were outside playing in the snow, Tim obviously couldn't cheerfully enjoy his days off and pretend that nothing was wrong. He spent his free moments waiting here at the bus stop hoping to see his father again. Normally my daddy passes by this stop about 10 times a day with his regional bus. Mom is still busy calling around and the police are helping in the search. And I have taken it upon myself to wait here at his regular bus stop in the hope that at some point his bus and my dad will turn up. But where his father actually turned out to be gave everyone a shock. So Tim had been sitting there for over 7 days. Of course, he slept at home and occasionally made the walk back to home for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But most of his time was spent at this bus stop, just sitting there and waiting for answer that did not come. He said that his mother tried to convince him every single day to stop his desperate bus stop search. But Tim wouldn't listen. He saw many people passing by that week who were also waiting for the bus and asked them if they had seen his father, but no one seemed to be able to help him. The answer was always the same. No, sorry, that description tells me nothing. After which the travelers got on the bus, the door would close and then they would drive away. But this old lady was different. She let the bus pass and decided to help Tim. She explained that her name was Enid and she couldn't believe people were just catching the bus without even trying to help Tim. But she was going to change that. She gave him a warm hug first and then bent down at the same level with the desperate young man. Lucky for you, I'm retired and there is no place I'm expected today. But now I do have a purpose for today. I'm going to help you find your father again, the sweet old woman told him. She invited Tim to get into her car and then the search could begin. So she offered to help him search for his father. Enid had lived in the city all her life and therefore knew every alley and every curve that made up this old city. But to have the best chance of success, they had to start at the beginning. They began by visiting the bus garage where Tim's father worked. There they talked to his coworkers and his boss, but no one had seen or heard anything suspicious up to this point. Tim's father was a model employee and had no problems at work. They too were concerned and had started searching, but without success. Perhaps the police could help them further. The pair drove to the police station and hoped to get more answers there. Meanwhile, the police was also searching for Tim's father, but so far they had not found a trace. Together, Enid and Tim decided to support the police in the search. Enid had the knowledge of the geography of the town as well as the area, while the police had the resources. Maybe this combination could be a breakthrough. They drove around for over 2 days, contacting the police every hour and hoping for that they would receive some form of positive news. but up till then without any success. How can a man just disappear off the face of the earth like that? Enid wondered. They would soon find the answer. And then something suddenly came to her mind. Tim had told Enid during the many rides in her car about the route his father drove home from work. The city bus parking lot was way out of town in a remote yard. From there he would have grabbed the car to drive back home. A place he did not arrive that Wednesday night. They had driven the route several times without encountering his car, but that was because his car was no longer on the common road. As Enid retraced the route in her mind, it was mostly a safe road with long straight lines, but there was one turn that was different. She suddenly remembered the turn after mile marker 241. Her eyes grew bigger. I think I know where your father is, she suddenly said in an anxious tone to Tim. The roads around this time of year were dangerously slippery, especially with the blizzards that had been raging across the country for several weeks now. Her own aunt long ago lived in a house that was near this grim bend, and she knew all too well of the looming dangers there. And although there were adequate street lights and guard rails along almost every part of the route, both were lacking at this bend. This shouldn't normally be a problem for the observant driver. But Tim's father must have been exhausted after such a long day, and with the snowstorm obstructing his field of vision, this could have had a very different outcome for him. Enid and Tim informed the police about the bend. And with an escort consisting of a police car and a rescue team, C drove toward this treacherous bend. They all climbed over the steep slope that was tight at the edge of this road and made their way down. It was not long before they saw evidence of an emergency. Tire tracks that led from the road down the slope to the icy lake below were found. This must have been his car, Enid thought to herself. It was not surprising that they did not see this before, as fresh snow had already erased most of these tracks. But when they looked more closely, it was clear that something had happened here. The team walked onto the large frozen lake. The large pool of water was completely frozen over. Over 8 inches of ice covered the dark water below. But halfway across the lake, they found their second big clue of that day. Everywhere the ice was a sleek white. Proof that the lake had been frozen shut for some time now. But about 30 meters from the shore, they found a frozen hole of more than 3 square meters with transparent ice. There has already been a large hole here, someone from the rescue team explained. New ice has an entirely different color than thick old ice. The rescue team did not hesitate for a moment. The hole was reopened and divers dove into the icy water. And what Enid had already feared was found. At the bottom of the lake, divers found Tim's father's car. The car was full of dents. An indication that it took a big hit before sinking into the lake. They held their breath and hoped he wouldn't be inside. But thankfully that was not the case. The car was abandoned. But where was Tim's father now? Police lifted the car out of the water and searched for clues. As expected, he had been underwater for over a week, they could tell. Tim explained that his father always went out prepared, and in his trunk there was always a backpack with warm blankets, cans of food, and a large construction tarp. But when the police opened the trunk, these items were gone. So he had plenty of time to save these survival items before the car sank, Tim said as he breathed a sigh of relief. That meant he could still be somewhere. So Harry, Tim's father, had to survive for over a week, walking around. But with temperatures of -10, it wasn't easy to believe that he had survived. Back then, they didn't know that the most important discovery was yet to be found. Indeed, the investigation into the mystery car was still in full operation when Officer Miller received the most important phone call of his career. The search helicopter had been combing the entire area for hours without success. It was a vast landscape, and if someone managed to flee the ice, they could have been anywhere. But on this particular afternoon he found that one clue that changed the whole situation. About 2.5 miles from the car wreck, something was written in huge letters in the snow, SOS. And there was a person standing next to it, waving to clearly get the attention of the hovering chopper. Could this be Harry? Was Tim's father finally found? The police helicopter was immediately put to the ground and the officers rushed to the still unknown person at that time. But when they arrived, it was not Harry who received them. It was a man of elderly age. He told them that he came across this homemade tent when he was walking with his dog in the frosty landscape. The tent was abandoned, but there were still a lot of things in it, so the owner couldn't be far, the man told them. This was a few days ago. Then I saw you guys flying over. I made this sign in the snow to get your attention. After all, I have news that will surreally make you happy. Come with me. The man took Enid, Tim, and the helicopter officers to his home. It was a dilapidated shack in the middle of nowhere. How can a man live here all by himself in this isolated land? Enid thought. On the way, the man began to recount his discovery. After I found the tent, I spent hours looking for the owner. But I couldn't find anyone. I went back a few more times to hopefully find clues among the stuff, but there was nothing. But when I got home and opened the door, I was suddenly faced with this surprise. The old man put the key in the lock, turned it a couple of times, and swung the door open. What were they going to find inside? Was it Tim's father? It was dark inside. But a single corner of the room was lit. And in the midst of that light, there he sat. Tim's father, Harry. The 45-year-old bus driver had been found. He looked pale and fragile. But although he was shivering all over his body, the officers could clearly detect a smile of joy on his withered face. Harry had found the man's house on his own in the midst of a fierce icy blizzard. He had taken shelter from the storm here in this cabin. And the bus driver had been a guest of the old man ever since. "Sir, what happened to you? And why haven't you contacted your family or the police yet?" the officer asked. Harry stood up and told his story. And it was exactly as Enid had predicted. Harry was exhausted after a long 14-hour shift and had crawled tiredly behind the wheel. And on that nasty curve, with poor lighting, he had paid just a little less attention. The car slid off the road and landed via the steep slope on the icy lake. The ice under the 1,100-plus pound vehicle gave way and the car sank to the bottom almost immediately, along with his phone and hence also every way of communication with his family. I had just enough time to lift my survival kit out of the trunk of the car before I saw the car disappear to the bottom of the lake, he recounted. I made the tent you found outside of the materials I brought with me and twigs and garbage I found in the forest. Then I tried to survive on the cans of food I had. But then the blizzard hit even harder. But Harry's tent could not withstand these gusts of wind and the desperate man had to look for another shelter. I had not eaten anything for a whole day and was very hypothermic. If I didn't find something soon, I would have frozen to death anyway, so I had to keep walking. But then he saw this shack. No one was home, but Harry needed shelter from the storm. When the old homeowner arrived home, Harry was already curled up in a sleeping bag. The man, whose name was Jacob, told Harry that he had found his tent and was already looking for him. He gave Harry some food and tried to revive him by letting him rest in a warm sleeping bag by the fire. "But now I still don't understand why you haven't contacted the outside world," the officer asked Harry, confused. To this, Jacob did have an answer. "I live an isolated life and have as little contact with the outside world as possible. Therefore, you will not find a telephone, computer, or television in this house." Jacob lived only on what nature could give him. Only once a month, his sister came by to give him the much-needed stuff from the nearest village some 7 miles away. The officers finally understood. Now it was up to them to restore contact with Harry's wife. They had a phone with them. Tim, of course, was already aware of his father's situation. But his mother and Harry's wife still sat worriedly at home. It was time to put her out of her misery with an important phone call. The phone rang. Ring, ring, ring. Harry's wife answered the phone and was shocked. The officer told her that thanks to the help of her son and the helpful Enid, they had found her husband and he had just been put into the helicopter. Tears of happiness rolled down her cheeks. And after a helicopter ride off 30 minutes, Harry was reunited with his wife and, of course, his son Tim. Jacob was honored shortly after for saving Harry's life. The family still invites him and Enid over every year to celebrate Christmas as a group. A grateful gesture for two wonderful people. And a warm and loving dinner well deserved, they believe. It's the only time a year I leave with Woodshed, but for Harry and his family, I'm happy to do it, Jacob says.